Hello, and welcome to The Brief Insight, your go to podcast for breaking down the latest trends, research, and policies shaping our world. Whether you're passionate about sustainability, global economics, or emerging innovations, this is where we simplify complex ideas to keep you informed and inspired. If you enjoy what you hear, don't forget to like this episode, subscribe to our channel, and share it with anyone looking for insights that matter. We're here every Monday and Friday, so hit that notification bell to stay updated. Your support helps us grow and continue bringing you sharp, relevant content that sparks conversation. Thank you for tuning into The Brief Insight. Now let's dive into today's topic.
Hey everyone, and welcome back. We're diving into some pretty wild developments today
Mhm.
surrounding TikTok, the Supreme Court, a national blackout, even a presidential plot twist. And it's all gone down in just the past few days.
Yeah, it's been a roller coaster. And honestly, what we're seeing here is a real-time showdown, one that brings up some major questions about national security, free speech, and what the future holds for online platforms.
Definitely a lot to unpack. Okay, so to set the scene, it was January 17th when the Supreme Court made this huge decision to uphold the Protecting Americans from Foreign Adversary-Controlled Applications Act, which basically outlawed U.S. companies from supporting TikTok because of its ties to China.
Right, and this ruling, it's not just about TikTok. It set this legal precedent that now lets the U.S. government basically scrutinize and potentially regulate other platforms just because they're connected to countries considered adversaries.
So fast forward just 2 days later, January 19th, this act throws the digital world into chaos. Can you imagine? You open TikTok and bam, total blackout.
I bet users were panicking.
A message pops up saying the app is unavailable because of this new law.
Yeah, that blackout lasted for about 12 hours. A crazy reminder of how ingrained TikTok has become in our culture and even our economy. And it wasn't just users who felt the impact. Google and Apple. They had to scramble to yank the app from their stores so they wouldn't get hit with those huge penalties.
Whoa, that's
Yeah.
intense. It really shows the power struggle going on, doesn't it, between the government and these tech giants.
For sure. This situation really highlights how tricky it is to regulate a digital world that's so globalized, where these companies like TikTok have a ton of influence.
And then, just when everyone's getting used to a world without TikTok, President Trump comes in and announces he'll be issuing an executive order that delays the ban to give them time to work out a deal.
Talk about a plot twist. No one saw that coming, especially considering Trump's previous stance on banning TikTok.
And the timing is interesting, right? Just a day before his inauguration. Makes you wonder about the politics behind it all. It definitely seems like he was trying to win over those younger voters who love the app. But no matter the reason, his move stopped an immediate shutdown of TikTok, buying them some time to figure things out.
Absolutely. But let's not forget what's at the core of this whole drama, the clash between national security and freedom of expression.
Right. So let's break that down. On one side, you've got the U.S. government saying that TikTok is a threat to national security because it could potentially be sharing user data with the Chinese government.
And their concerns aren't totally out there. I mean, the FBI has said that TikTok can get its hands on a ton of user data, even info from people who don't even use the app.
Wait, really? So even if I don't have TikTok, they could still have my info? That's kind of creepy.
That's what the FBI is claiming. It raises some serious questions about how far their data collection goes. It could go beyond what users are sharing knowingly and even affect people who aren't on the platform.
So it's not just about what you're posting or liking. It's about all this data they're gathering in the background, which could be used for anything, from ads to, well, something way more sinister.
Exactly. And to really get the government's perspective, you have to factor in how the legal system works in China. Their laws can force companies to share data with the government, essentially making them tools for spying.
So even though TikTok has denied sharing user data with the Chinese government over and over, the U.S. government isn't taking any chances, especially with how many users TikTok has.
Yeah, the sheer number of users, over 170 million in the US alone, definitely magnifies the risk. It turns what might seem like individual bits of data into this massive pool of information that could be exploited.
I see why the government's worried. But then on the other side, you have TikTok and its creators saying that this act is stepping all over their First Amendment rights to free speech and expression.
And that's where it gets really tricky. How do you balance keeping the country safe with protecting everyone's right to say what they want?
Right. Like, where do you even draw the line?
That's the million-dollar question. It's a question that goes way beyond TikTok. This case could change how the U.S. government deals with all sorts of online platforms and even change how we think about online freedom in this digital age.
You know, it's interesting. This whole TikTok thing has really gotten people talking about the power of algorithms and how they shape what we see online. It's like we're all part of this big experiment without even realizing it.
That's a really good point. The algorithm is what makes TikTok tick. It's what keeps people glued to their phones. It's designed to show you stuff it thinks you'll love. But that same power is what worries people about it, potentially swaying opinions or even manipulating behavior.
So it's not just about keeping data private. It's about this potential for someone to control what we see and what we believe, even if we don't realize it. It's almost like a digital puppet master.
Wow, that's a great way to put it. And it gets right to the heart of why this act isn't just about who owns TikTok. It's about making sure there's no operational relationship with any part of the old company that could mess with the algorithm. They want to make sure there's no way for anyone to sneakily influence what people see. They want a clean break.
Which brings us to the whole First Amendment debate. Can the government really restrict access to a platform just because they think it might be manipulating people, even if it's subtle and hard to prove?
Justice Gorsuch, in his opinion, he really nailed this dilemma. He said, one man's covert content manipulation is another's editorial discretion. It makes you wonder, where's the line between deciding what content to show and actually manipulating people?
Yeah, so let's say a U.S. company buys TikTok and everything gets separated. But the algorithm still has some connection to China. Would users even know? And if they don't, can they really choose what they're watching if they don't know the whole story?
Exactly. It's like being shown a version of reality that someone else has carefully put together without you even knowing. It makes you question how much control we really have online.
This whole situation is a real head-scratcher.
It is.
It is. And it shows how tangled up national security, free speech, and individual choice have become in the digital age. It's like we're navigating uncharted territory here.
Maybe this Supreme Court's decision can give us some direction. What were some of the key things they said that explain their reasoning?
Well, in a rare unanimous decision, the court said that the government's concerns about data security and the potential for China to misuse that data were more important than TikTok's role as a platform for people to express themselves.
And it wasn't just about the possibility of data sharing. They really highlighted what makes TikTok different its size and how easily it could be controlled by a foreign power. They even pointed out the vast swaths of sensitive data the platform collects. They did. And that data collection part is key to understanding why the government is so worried. They're not just worried about the data itself, but what a foreign country could do with it. Spying, blackmail, even messing with elections. It's scary stuff.
No kidding. It is.
And to really get the seriousness of it, you have to consider the laws in China. Their laws can force companies to give up data to the government, which turns them into potential tools for intelligence gathering.
So even though TikTok keeps saying they don't share user data with the Chinese government, the U.S. government isn't buying it, especially with all the potential for abuse.
Right. And the Supreme Court basically agreed with that in their decision.
But wait, I thought not everyone on the court was totally on board with this act.
That's right. Justices Sotomayor and Gorsuch, they agreed with the final decision, but they brought up some interesting points that show how complicated this case is. They both seemed concerned about how this act could affect the First Amendment.
I'd like to hear more about what they had to say. What were their main arguments?
So Justice Sotomayor, she argued that this act makes it harder for people to express themselves because it could stop TikTok from sharing its content in the U.S. She was worried about how this would affect content creators, saying it infringes on their right to choose where they want to share their work.
So even if you get why the government is worried about national security, you can't just shut down a whole platform without thinking about the people who use it to express themselves.
Exactly. And Justice Gorsuch, he had some serious doubts about the government's argument that this act was needed to stop covert content manipulation. He said that's way too broad and could be used to silence anyone the government disagrees with.
Oh yeah, that quote, one man's covert content manipulation is another's editorial discretion. That sums up his point perfectly. It shows how hard it is to balance national security and free speech.
It does. And it reminds us that what might look like harmful manipulation to one person might just be someone else making choices about what content to show.
It's a slippery slope for sure.
Yeah.
But ultimately, both justices agreed that the government had shown that there was a real threat to national security. So how do we go from this complicated legal decision to TikTok going dark across the country?
Well, on January 19th, the day the act was supposed to go into effect, TikTok users all over the US woke up to find out the app was gone. It was a real eye-opener about how much power the government has online.
It's like someone suddenly put up a wall around the internet, which we usually think of as this open and free space.
And what's really interesting is how TikTok responded. They didn't just explain what was happening in their message to users, they actually appealed directly to President Trump.
It's like they were taking their case to the only person who could change their fate.
They were. And it shows how power works here. They knew that their future wasn't just about the law, it was about politics, too.
And their gamble worked, didn't it?
It did. Within hours of Trump saying he'd delay the ban, TikTok was back.
What a wild ride. But even though they got a break for now, TikTok's future in the US is still up in the air.
Absolutely. And this whole thing has implications that go way beyond TikTok. It sets a precedent and raises questions about how the U.S. government might deal with other online platforms, especially ones connected to countries they see as rivals.
So what does this all mean for the average person scrolling through TikTok?
It shows that we're not just passively watching videos. Our online experiences are being shaped by these algorithms, by how data is collected, and by global power struggles.
It's like we're all characters in this digital drama, and the stakes are higher than we ever imagined.
Exactly. And the drama's still going on.
So we're basically in this holding pattern, right? TikTok's back, but that threat of a ban is still hanging over them.
Yeah.
It's got to be stressful for everyone involved.
Oh, absolutely. This uncertainty makes it hard to plan for the future. Investors might be scared to put money into a platform that could just disappear. Content creators could lose their income, their communities.
It's like they're building on quicksand. You never know when it might all sink.
And the effects could reach way beyond TikTok. What about other platforms with ties to other countries? What does this say to them?
It feels like a warning shot, right? Like the U.S. government is showing that they're not afraid to step in and control what happens online.
That's one way to look at it. It could mean we're headed towards a more divided internet where countries split things up based on politics instead of keeping it all connected.
So instead of everyone sharing ideas and information freely, we could end up with a digital world where country borders become digital walls.
Right. And that doesn't just affect free speech, it affects the global economy too. We could see a digital trade war with companies stuck in the middle.
Okay, so let's say a U.S. company buys TikTok and everything gets separated.
Hmm.
What about the algorithm? You know, the secret sauce that made the app so popular, does that come with the deal?
That's the big question. The algorithm is what everyone wants, and China has already hinted that they might not be willing to give it up.
So imagine you're this U.S. company. You just spent a ton of money on TikTok, but without the algorithm, you basically bought an empty shell. You have to start from scratch to make it as addictive as it was before.
It'd be a huge challenge, like trying to bake a cake without a recipe. You might end up with something that looks like a cake, but it won't taste the same.
This whole thing is like a giant puzzle. So many pieces, so many possibilities. It's hard to wrap your head around it all.
It's definitely complicated. But one thing's for sure, this whole TikTok situation has made us face some hard truths about the digital world we live in.
Truths about how our data is being used, how algorithms are controlling what we see, and how much power governments and tech companies have. It's a lot to think about.
It is, but it's also a chance for us to rethink how we use technology, to be smarter about the information we see, to demand more honesty and accountability from these platforms.
It's like we've been blindly walking through this digital revolution, and now we're finally waking up, realizing that the choices we make today will shape the internet for years to come.
Exactly. This is a wake-up call. The TikTok case might just be the beginning, but it shows us that we have a voice and we need to use it.
So what can we do? How can we make sure the future of the internet is safe and free?
Stay informed. Talk about these issues like we're doing right now. Demand transparency from tech companies. Support policies that protect people's rights online. It's up to all of us to create the digital world we want to live in.
I think that's a great place to wrap things up. This deep dive has been a wild ride with so many twists and turns and so many questions, but that's what makes it so interesting, right? It gets us thinking, talking, and hopefully taking action.
I agree, and that's what matters. Thanks for joining us as we explored TikTok, the First Amendment, and what freedom online really means. Until next time, stay curious.